The thing about solo introductions like this, before interviews like What's Ahead, is that you can say things about your guest and his or her organization that his or her humility would never permit. You can say words like important, or rare, or intrepid, or strings of words like damn good at their job. All of this applies to the nonprofit CyArk, and today's guest, Chris Millbern, its head of field capture for 5 years. Together, they are leveraging 3D technology to make the world's cultural heritage accessible to new audiences and future generations. Perhaps more inspiring is their empowerment of the locals of these iconic, historic, sometimes embattled places. They frequently teach these locals reality capture so that they themselves can, if they choose, be stewards of their land, buildings, artifacts, and art. CyArk is not new to the scene, make no mistake, but they are tirelessly reinventing and optimizing themselves and their workflows. A prime example is the Gaussian Splatting they're embracing. I was blown away by Chris, as well as CyArk and the humble yet fiery passion of both. Frankly, I couldn't wait to donate. And if you'd join me, even for just a few bucks, you'd be doing a world of good for the world. So enjoy Chris Millbern and the many places he has seen as CyArk's head of field capture. Chris Millbern, welcome, sir, to the Recap Podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, the terrain I am giddy to cover with you today, but I figured why not start with your most recent trek? It was to some fairly special land in Northern California, is that right?
That's correct. We're out in Pond Farm, which is in Guerneville, Northern California. And this place is a really cool site. We just did a full 3D scan. We're building a tapestry, which is CyArk's product. And it covers a ceramicist that actually had a private studio out there. And it feels like an abandoned site until you actually go inside and realize it's one of the most amazing pottery studios that's ever been done and taught a whole lot of the major ceramicists in California.
What are we talking, current ceramicists, or this is having
past teacher to current students? So Marguerite is the woman's name who owned it. She actually fled Germany when Hitler took over. Ended up studying, though, in Germany prior to that, the Bauhaus type of, I guess it's really learning. It's an art style. And what that means is having a practical underlying theory behind your art. And she brought that with her, started a ceramic studio in Northern California, and then every year for a long summer would teach a cadre of students for like 40 years. From like 1942 to 80.
Wow.
So you can imagine how many professional ceramics artists kind of came out of this kind of like almost a hippie commune run by a very serious German, kind of Dutch influenced woman, and made for quite an interesting story, to say the least.
No kidding. It's like if before Silicon Valley, there was Pond Farm for ceramicists. That's
exactly. All right. Well, and you know, one of the things that we love to do is we interview and create a full story behind these sites. So CyArk has a long history of doing this 3D scanning, but what we're really doing is creating a tapestry where the site is not just the focal point, it's the stories of the people. And having these students reminisce of the pre-cell phone, sit for 9 weeks in front of a pottery wheel, you eat lunch, dinner, breakfast, cook, raise things on the farm. As silly, I think to us and to a lot of people who have lived some of that lifestyle, it's not that surprising. But then trying to translate that as a California State's park program to kids and teenagers of like, no, you just learned. You just sat and learned. And that was it. Has been an interesting story to tell.
Old school indeed. So you mentioned this is a state park in California?
Yeah, so it's part of a larger California state park, but this historic landmark was donated back to the parks program, kind of in conjunction so that it could be preserved. And so it's like a tour only kind of a unique little spot that's hiding inside of this larger California state park. and just makes for a really interesting day trip if anybody's in that Northern California spot.
Absolutely. So what makes, assuming you've done maybe other state parks or at least projects within them, is there anything uniquely challenging or complex, be it logistics or, red tape?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the answer is doing things the right way is never easy. I think one of the industry tropes of 3D scanning is people trying to scan things and get away with it, and we go very much the opposite, where we get all partners on board. Everything from the people who live nearby or the people who live on site, landowners, stakeholders, government administrators, and we make sure everyone's on board, and that's tough. It takes a ton of time.
Yeah.
But the nice part of that being that the end result is something that gets to be embraced by everybody. I think the difficulty of working with California state parks, national parks, a lot of regulations, everything from drone use to land access, of making sure that we're allowing people to visit. We're not impacting the site while still trying to scan it. And I think for those who are listening who know about 3D scanning, it's not the easiest thing to do when you have tour groups of children showing up, or, buses of people, or a kiosk that sells hot dogs right in front of the main part of the site. So us being experts at navigating that bit of challenge has been something that set us aside.
Oh, that's absolutely its own skill set, Forget just
Absolutely.
the scanning and modeling, that's unsung difficulties. So,
Sure.
Extrapolating that, and for most projects, how you guys are so diligent with collaboration and making sure, there's no guerrilla style scanning, and you're making sure all parties are on board. Typically, who reaches out to whom?
That's a great question. We have all manners of project leads. So we've had people who have reached out to us. We've reached out to people. And I know that's a really simplistic way to say it, but we've had everything from private companies and governments of nations who go, hey, we have this site we found, or via word of mouth have learned about you guys. We'd love to have you come out and scan. On the flip side, we offered grant programs, competitions. We offer scans to sites that either really need it, or sometimes we find private funding where somebody says, hey, we'd love to sponsor a scan, and we really want to preserve this heritage of our people or of our government's underlying history, whatever it is. And so they might front the money, and then we go out and find a partner and say, hey, we think your site would be really great for a 3D preservation project. So it can be from anything. And some of our best projects have been from like cold emails to our inbox, which is always really fun to, end up in Northern Africa because somebody said, hey, you know what? We got something special out here, and we have a small nonprofit that can find some money. Do you guys want to help us? And absolutely.
I know it's not directly your job, at least I don't believe it is, but can you speak to that? The world's huge. The decision-making process in choosing one site over another.
We, as an organization at CyArk, so we've been doing this, and I say this organizationally, not myself, for over 20 years. And I think there's been a long shift and understanding that the most famous sites are not always the sites that need to be scanned and talked about. And more than that, the places where people want to work with you are always going to be a more successful product. And so we've transitioned now that our tapestry product has gotten quite notable and our word of mouth has gotten pretty strong. Most of the projects that we try to do, there is some amount of invitation to start with. And then narrowing in from that list is really, can we deliver on what people are looking for? Because there are some sites that are enormous and could take, you could take a year of intense field work to do it properly. And that's what they're expecting. If we have that conversation and we go, hey, you guys are looking for a year's worth of work, we can absolutely start talking about what that would take. But I have a feeling that's not what you're actually after. Because at that point, it's better to train locals and create a program for them to go ahead and do what they need to do. And so we've offered tons of trainings. We've worked with embassies, the Ambassadors Fund programs through the United States, as well as global heritage initiatives that have allowed us to conduct trainings when we know that we're not going to be able to select those sites efficiently enough. And you're right, like there is too many places on Earth that need preservation and cultural documentation work. But on the flip side, I think that there's a lot more people willing to do this work than there is opportunity and knowledge around it. So it's an easy solution in a way that we're excited to tackle on a daily basis.
Beautiful. Chris, there are numerous case studies of yours I want to unravel, but I want to tee them up from 10,000 feet first and ask you, what is the greatest threat to cultural preservation?
That's a great question. So I think that when someone asks, what's the greatest threat? The answer in reality is going to differ site to site and place to place. And my actual answer then to kind of elevate above the real threats is I think cultural heritage is a human problem that needs to be solved with human stories. And what I mean by that is CyArk was founded as a kind of a scanning collective where the idea was an archive. We do preservation level scanning and you put it in a library and you hope nothing happens to a place. But if something happens to a place, then you can say, oh, this is what it looked like. This is what the 3D geometry of it was. And over time, and I think one of the benefits of our nonprofit being around so long, we've been able to see that 3D data is not very valuable in a vacuum. And cultural heritage is not very valuable in a vacuum. If you have nothing but academic papers, if you have nothing but measurements and, the specific understanding of which brick is in what place, you don't keep the story alive long enough to make it worth anything. And I give Petra as a great example of one that we've worked with both recently and I've been to many, many times and spent, almost months, if not years of my life in. And I can give you a millimeter map of one of those tombs. And we can say, great, it's been preserved. Cultural heritage complete. And in reality, if I were to do that same scan the moment that it was built in 3rd, 4th century, it's no more valuable information now as it was then. Whereas the story of the Nabateans that we now have to just piece together a little bit of history and some anthropology and guess at what certain parts of that tomb were used for. If someone had taken 10 minutes to write down and say, hey, this is what we use it for. I'm building this. My name is this. I love living around here. And actually, this is where we keep our sheep. It would solve all of the cultural heritage problem. And even if we lost that tomb, the understanding of what that tomb was and the history it played for humanity is so much more valuable. So to long form answer your question, to me, the greatest threat to cultural heritage is losing the understanding of why we're even preserving something. Because if you don't have that, people lose interest. And if people lose interest, you're not going to be able to preserve it even in the traditional means. The money and the effort just isn't going to stay. So we really now focus on trying to tell the whole story.
Very, very eloquently said. You mentioned Petra, and you also mentioned the notion of people stopping caring. I think Petra, I think a lot of people do too. It's synonymous with tourism, popularity. Is that in and of itself, though, its own obstacle? I mean, that has to be a culprit of, I don't know, maybe not decay. I've not been, so I can't speak to exactly. But I'm aware of, CyArk's efforts on that front. And I'm just curious, actually, how there's almost a paradox, I suppose, right? I mean, something that ancient, but that exposed to just human traffic and,
so the Petra is a really interesting one to bring that case example up. I think you understand that there's tons of sites that have this challenge. When we talk about Chichen Itza and the staircases of some of the rebuilt pyramids, and as the tourists go up and down them, slow grooves in the rock that then collect water that then destroy them even further. Petra is a great example in certain respects because a lot of that sandstone is very easily both destroyed by just human interaction as a whole, graffiti, things like this, but also, tourism, just the impact of people walking in a place. I think that there's two fronts. One is exactly what we're doing, the ability to visit without impact. So the digital twin, and CyArk is not alone in this. There's plenty of people who do virtual tours of all types, and I think that that's great. We always want to be able to promote a place. What we found actually is most of the time when we do a 3D scan or create a digital tour, it raises interest in visiting. It does not detract. So I don't want to say it that we do a 3D scan so that people don't have to visit and then don't have to go. But rather the impacts can be measured and stated and then marked. And any site is not permanent, no matter how much preservation work. And maybe this is a controversial take. For me, I don't think so. Places are going to change and people are going to impact the world that they live in. And if we can understand that and track that, yes, the place may not look the same as it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But if you can show people what that impact was, what it looked like originally, and then give them the history as it is created ongoing, I don't think that that's that particularly negative of a thing, because the alternative is to freeze it in time, which is either impossible or just removes people from the equation entirely.
I'd like to shift to a modern, or at least modernly relevant use case, and that's Ukraine. Specifically, CyArk's, if I have this right, Ukrainian Heritage Digitization and Dissemination Initiative.
You got it.
Collaboration with Archaic Scientific and Research Lab. What a project. What was the genesis of it?
Well, so Casey Haddock, who is our director of programs and development, had worked tirelessly to create this program. It feels like out of thin air. He got met up with Archaic and they kind of hatched a plan, and we found funding initially through the Ambassadors Fund program with the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. And the real genesis is obviously the war. And so as the Russians invaded and started bombing, there's a huge concern that permanent pieces of cultural history, that's shared human history in a lot of cases, was going to be lost. And so our technology is really uniquely, and our technology, any 3D scanning technology, is extremely important to museums to preserve things. I don't think, that's not a hard concept to grasp. But when the threat of your building collapsing is imminent, I think that interest gets elevated. And so we created this program specifically to train scientists, museum professionals, and really 3D scanners in how to document their own cultural heritage. And Archaic were already experts. We came in to support with both training and equipment because they're a small nonprofit that didn't have necessarily the funding to pull it all off alone. And so in conjunction with them, managed to train people from the National History Museum of Kyiv, of Zaporizhia, of Dnipro, and send them back out to start documenting their own heritage and their sites, so that they can hide certain things and hopefully move them, and that if things are lost, they still have a record. And two, to be able to share them, because people aren't able to go to the museums anymore. Not always, at least in certain cases. So the ability to share these objects now with a global audience instead of just going, oh, come to Kyiv, come visit. That's a harder selling point than it was a few years ago. So these museums still have an opportunity to share their heritage, which is really special to us. And we're now creating, it should be released sometime by the end of this year, a full digital museum of some of their favorite pieces. They've scanned hundreds and hundreds of artifacts and objects. And so this digital museum exhibit will be something that people can visit from anywhere in the world.
Wow. Superb. You were hands-on in the teaching, unless the photographs I saw were fake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really fun. I have now led, dozens and dozens of trainings across the world, and each one is its own little cultural experiment, right? You only have a set amount of time to break the barrier and make friends, because people learn with friends better than they do teachers. I'm just 100% convinced of this. When it's professional to professional, you can try to be the demagogue as much as you want, and it's so boring to teach 3D scanning without just doing it. And if you're going to be doing it, you'd rather do it with your friends than someone who's silently standing over you and judging. I think anybody that's done photogrammetry knows the pain of standing silently with a tripod and moving 6 inches, a meter at a time. So you might as well have something to talk about. And Ukraine was an interesting challenge because the Eastern European seriousness to the American painful friendliness is about as distant of a cultural divide as you can conquer. But the appreciation, I think, for both sides coming to the table and just getting to business immediately raised our ability to perform miraculously. And they have been some of the best students that we've ever taught.
CyArk is tirelessly global. To what extent is translation a problem? Like logistically speaking, do you just have a bounty of translators, or do you use, is it all digital and Google Translate, or?
That's a great question. And so I started my career, or didn't start, but I kind of started it into CyArk through working for a lot of global organizations. So National Geographic, partnered with them on a lot of projects, did some filming for BBC, some like wildlife stuff, these kinds of projects that you learn to talk without speaking, where everything from gestures to facial emotions are a huge communication tool that you can kind of learn to master. That's answer number one. The real answer is to make sure that you're working with partners that want to translate for you because they want to understand, and they will provide some amount of translation capability. But it is always difficult. I laugh because I feel bad every single time it's been like 19 countries in the last 2 years or something like that, right? And every time somebody starts to teach a couple of sentences, and I try to pick up as many words as I can and wherever we happen to be, and I'll be in Cambodia and somebody will go like, no, remember last week I taught you this, like it's this. I go, oh, I'm so sorry. They go like, you should really learn Cambodian. It would make the work a lot easier. And it's like, I did the math, and in 1 year, I think I would have had to learn like 11 or 13 languages to properly communicate with every partner that we were either in planning or working with. And so eventually it goes out the door, and you just goodwill and find someone who has some amount of English to speak with you, and then go from there.
Sure.
But we're a pretty multilingual organization. I think we got 5 or 6 languages with our employees. So we cross a lot of boundaries that way too. Beautiful.
How was the working relationship with Archaic?
Oh, fantastic. They're amazing. It was actually something that, working with the Ukrainians, they were really motivated, because when you are under threat of attack at all times and you get a break to learn something that can benefit your people, your community, your career, that's a unique opportunity, not something that we're just magically providing. They made it for themselves, but it makes it so that they are very engaged. And so working with them became really beneficial, I think, to both of us, because it's really easy to get into a routine when you're teaching. And I think, especially with tech and 3D scanning, I find myself all the time going, okay, this is the way to do it. And somebody goes, no, last week they pushed an update. You don't have to mask manually anymore. AI does this now. And I will absolutely fall into those routines because I'm in Cambodia scanning a staircase, and I don't keep up with that. And the Ukrainians were the best at just laughingly finishing a project before I finished teaching the lesson, because they go, no, we clicked this button, that a little highlighted thing, it just did it. And I go, what do you mean it just did it? This takes 2 hours and all sorts of, and they go, no, it just did it. Okay, teach me. And Archaic was fantastic at being ahead of the curve and teaching us things. I think that goes, though, for a lot of the organizations that we teach and work with. It's very rare that someone is going to finish a full course on photogrammetry and not be invested in the outcome. I think that it's a pretty dry subject when you're sitting in a boardroom or a classroom or even just outside. But it's a lot of fun after the fact. So if you make it to that point, we usually have a pretty good working relationship.
What's been the total duration of this project, Chris?
We've been working with the Ukrainians for 3 years. So Archaic's partnership with us is 3 consecutive years. It's been longer than that in planning and continual output. products. But the first year, 2 years, we had funding through this ambassadors fund with the U.S. Embassy. With all the political upheaval and kind of the gutting of the State Department, we ended up with no funding. Project got dropped, even though it was kind of originally planned for a 3-year output to have this digital museum be the final product. And Jagiellonian University in Poland, which had been hosting us and was huge supporters of the program, actually stepped up and helped provide a lot of the missing funding to keep the program going for its 3rd year.
Wow.
So it kind of shows the impact that kind of the neutral observers, the people who are just hosting and providing the boardrooms, saw so much value in the program that they decided to raise the money themselves, despite them having tons of projects that they need funding for their own purposes. So huge shout out to that university, Jagiellonian, for hosting us.
No kidding. And that actually answers my next question was going to be, to what extent did the conflict itself alter capture strategy and the education approach once there, you know?
Sure.
Were there any other instances like the university
Absolutely.
stepping up or?
Yeah, so we couldn't train in Ukraine, especially when we were originally sponsored by the embassy. They weren't going to send Americans into Ukraine where they would have to be responsible for them if they didn't have to be. So we kind of found that neutral territory in Poland, and the university ended up being the most amazing partners that they could be. I think people don't understand. It's really easy to watch a YouTube tutorial and go, "This is how you 3D scan a building," and they'll be right. But we find challenges all the time, and I think we specialize in creating new strategies when the conditions don't match the ideal. And Ukraine is a great example of that. Drones, not a thing. You are not going to get a recreational drone in the air in the middle of Kyiv and still be able to keep your job or stay out of jail as a Ukrainian, because they don't know whose drone is what and to trust. And there's tons of bases of operations in and out of the city and anti-aircraft guns. And one of the museum buildings that our team actually wanted to scan, they go, "Hey, there's a special forces base that's like, not privately, but very publicly just out. And they have armed guards standing. If we try to fly the drone, we will not be talking to you after this." So it goes, okay, well, we're going to figure out how to put targets on the roof, and we're going to get ladders for the adjacent buildings, and you're going to talk to them for permission. And we might spend 3 hours creating this plan where they can photograph the roof despite not being able to get access. That's one of many examples, but I would say the biggest takeaway is generally that it's very easy to say, "Oh, just use this equipment or that equipment." And we had to be really, really specific about all of our imports, exports, the types of cameras and things that they were able to use out in public, just the amount of time that you get to have outside, things like that. We tried to plan around.
Do you anticipate your time being done in Ukraine?
I think that we have high hopes to keep different projects going. The trainings have been so successful year after year, and everybody's really enjoyed it, that I don't think we have any set plans in stopping. This particular project kind of came to a close, but we've got ongoing discussions on what else could be done, including training even students from Jagiellonian University. We're doing joint trainings, all sorts of things. But for me personally, they're some very close friends now. So I have no intention of stopping working with them, even if we're not doing it in an official capacity.
It's beautiful. Last question on Ukraine, Chris. You taught extensively, and I'm just curious what your time in Ukraine has taught you.
Well, so I never set foot in Ukraine. I'll make that abundantly clear. The time though spent with the Ukrainians, what it teaches, and I've had this in a couple of places, but it's an amazing reminder that you can't be complacent in your own cultural history. There are things that you assume everyone will know and teach. Maybe you learned it in school. Maybe you went to a museum. All of those museums are funded because of people and because of support and because of interest. All of those stories and those histories are told because someone prints the book and puts the information down and researched it originally. And even in my kind of short career in cultural history, compared to many who are much smarter than I am in this field, um, we've seen changes, and we see it today in our country. There's narrative shifts and access shifts to cultural history that can happen overnight. And whether that's via war or via climate change, or because, in Rapa Nui, for example, something might roll into the ocean overnight. All of a sudden, you really wish you had done a little bit more work on that cultural history narrative of, wait, did we get a photo from the backside? Did we write down how big that was? Who was that woman that died last year that knew what this was about? Oh no, nobody wrote her story down. Who deleted the interview off the computer? I just see that time and time again. And I think the Ukrainians did an amazing job of kind of teaching that, of like, no, we want to be active. We have to care, because if we don't, someone else will take it over, and they absolutely will not tell the same story.
Okay, Chris, we talked about the genesis of Ukraine. If we could zoom out, I want to talk about CyArk itself for a bit, and what drew you to them and how it all began and what you were doing prior.
Sure. So my employment history is a bit of a pinball bouncing around in a machine. I actually started in wildlife biology, which is everybody's intro to 3D scanning. No, I graduated right about when the global recession hit, and people were not hiring wildlife biologists. That was not a career path that was easily pursued during that time. And so I actually got a job on an ambulance and worked as an EMT in downtown Los Angeles and North Hollywood. Kind of got my medical chops and my trauma chops in that field.
Sure.
And I just hated it. I loved the kind of the adventure and the adrenaline and the helping people part, but there's moments where you're getting paid $9 an hour, and you stop at a 7-Eleven and you realize you just spent 2 hours worth of work grabbing a hot dog and a soda, and you go, oh, man, this is not a long-term plan for me.
And by the way, not office work either,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, everything's got its downsides, absolutely, too. But for me, it was one of those, I definitely want to be doing more than doing this. And as I'm lamenting this in an old apartment building in Los Angeles, somebody goes, hey, I'm actually working at the hospital in UCLA. You want to come? We might need an EMT there. And I ended up working in hyperbarics, which is the study and practice of pressure-based medicine. So everything from scuba divers to diabetic wounds, but basically a big NASA-labeled pressure chamber underground in the hospital there. And I would go in that pressure chamber and learn everything there is to learn about gas physics and diving physics. And that got me started in an underwater career. And it kind of was just this gradually building, very weird skill set that not many people need, but the ones who needed it. And the summary of all of that is that eventually I became a dive medic. I've been working on photography as just a passion project on the side. And the people that I was working for as a dive medic realized very quickly it's a lot cheaper to have one guy who's both the medic and the photographer than it is to pay two. And that got me into a lot of doors. And I ended up winning a sponsorship from Rolex, who bankrolled a science learning year for me through the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society. And that's my little plug. Anybody that's listening that knows anybody who's interested, young person in underwater anything, the Our World Underwater Scholarship Society is a nonprofit that actually gave out these awards and sponsored me for a year to travel the world and learn everything that I could about medicine, science, technology, photography, whatever I could grab. Now, that all sounds really nice. The truth is that they gave you about, back then, $25K for a year. And if anybody's ever tried to fly internationally and go scuba diving, $25,000 is not an annual salary you can do that on.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically live on people's couches and, bum tank refills, and anything that you can do to work your way through is what you do. And that teaches a lot of independence and skills that are really necessary for international expedition work and field work. The understanding that you can never rest on your laurels. You need to be earning your way at all times, and you're going to be generally uncomfortable and without a toothbrush if you forget it. So all of that is to say, had worked on all these kind of international expeditions over time, got partnered with National Geographic, absolute dream of mine. And over time, though, I felt like I was doing media stories for media's sake. Filming, creating documentaries, you see it time and time again. People are appreciative, but a lot of times the story is, National Geographic photographer goes out and is setting up a detection system for gunshots in the DRC. And that's a project that I worked on. But once the story is out, a lot of the attention I felt dropped away very quickly. Now things have changed a lot. I'm speaking 10 years in the past now, but at that time it felt like it was for a headline, not necessarily for an accomplishment or for a lasting product. And when the company that I worked for then closed down, within the same week, I was like so tired. I've been living on the road, more or less doing 8 months internationally for 4 or 5 years. And I go, great, I'm actually looking forward to unemployment. And 1 week later, CyArk posted the job posting for, hey, we're looking for someone who does 3D scanning, specifically who's good at, international travel and working alone. Oh. And I go, man, I can't pass this way. That's not a job opening that exists. When somebody asks me, how do I do what you do? I go, I have no idea. I truly have no idea. I've seen 2 job postings my entire life and I took both of them. So I apologize, but I just can't give advice on that. And that's how I ended up with CyArk, because they just fit the bill of doing something for impact's sake, doing something that has a purpose, but fit into the skill set that I knew that I wanted to be a part of.
I mean, talk about a match made in heaven.
Crazy. I've always said when somebody goes, hey, like I said, how do I replicate what you do? But more importantly, could you do it again? I go, no, never in a million years. When somebody goes, take a bet, you learn everything you learned, but you go back 10 years, I go, no, because the needles that I had to thread and the lotteries that I had to win to get where I am today, purely luck. I like to think there's some ability and some preparation in there, but a lot more luck than I'd like to admit for my ego's sake.
Well, you're thriving, sir. And if homework is correct, you're at 5 years, I think, fairly recently, right?
Yeah,
with CyArk?
That's correct. I think, you know better than I do looking at the dates. Time flies when you're more or less living on airplanes.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, with your itineraries. Absolutely. So are there misconceptions you encounter about what CyArk does?
Yeah, I think that, misconception almost makes it sound like it's a mistake to believe, but I think CyArk has changed a lot in its history. And I think that CyArk has been around and pervasive. So people's understanding of what CyArk does can be correct and outdated. And what we used to do, I think, like I maybe mentioned before, is we worked on preservation scanning, put it in the library. What we do now is taking that word preservation and saying, what does that really mean? And we work with local partners. We make sure that our product is something that's going to tell the story and create new audiences for the people who are interested in that site, and the site holders themselves. The misconception, if we want to put it that way, is that CyArk is scanning these places for some kind of scientific level documentation. And while we absolutely have that underlying data that can be used in that way, we're handing it all over to the sites and then we're moving on once we've created the story. And that product Tapestry, our kind of digital platform where we have these tours that people can go see for free. I think the idea that CyArk is still like a UNESCO where we're there to preserve it and to hold it in place. No, like we're here to tell the story via the people who want to tell that story, not us. We are not creating that story. And I think that's the big evolution change that CyArk's undergone in the last 5 years.
Has CyArk ever arrived too late?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever thought about it in those terms. Of course is the answer. Of course we've arrived too late. Arguably, we are always too late. There is always more information that existed that no longer exists in every site. So yes, is every time. The way that I think you mean that, a couple of times I think we've been invited and arrived, and you talk to people, and the reason it turns out we were invited was because someone realized, uh-oh, we used to tell the stories of this place, and so passed away, and this person got a different job and and we realized that we don't have the story anymore, and we don't want that to be the case. We'll do our best to, retrace those steps and come up with a story as close as possible. But yeah, sometimes that's just lost to time. But on the flip side, the nice thing about doing what we do is it's a time capsule. And just because you don't have the full story doesn't mean that that's not part of the story. Because inevitably somebody talks about the person who died and what a nice person they were and what they felt about the place. And in my mind, that's just as valuable a history as sometimes what another type of documentation would do.
What is the value or the principle that you and CyArk as an organization share most passionately?
There's a lot of overlap, so it's hard to choose, which is the hesitation. I think my passion for engaging communities productively is something that is very hard to do as a large organization. When I worked for a previous company called Virtual Wonders and partnered with National Geographic and these large projects with millions and millions of dollars and lots of attention, it is so easy for the people who live in a place to be steamrolled, even if your intentions are good. I don't think many people these days are working in international expeditions, certainly the minority, where they're looking to take advantage of somebody. Usually what happens is people get busy and life is life, and the ball gets dropped where they go, oh yeah, we'll totally put you on our research paper. Oh, we'll send you that data. Oh, like when this opens, it's going to be amazing. And I have a huge passion for doing my best, and I'm far from perfect because unfortunately the truth of field logistics and international politics is perfection is a myth. But we hand the data on site. We deliver a hard drive before we leave. We go, we don't know when this will release. If it doesn't release, here's how to do it. We try to, anytime we can, we are leaving equipment, cameras, laptops, scanners in certain cases. We'll, because we're larger organization that we partner with, we try to find a way that we can leave something that actually has some capacity building, some utility for the people, because yes, having a virtual tour is great. But having a virtual tour that is on a website that goes away is a limited thing. And so long form answer, CyArk has worked very hard to create a product that is not a perfect product. When you go and see our sites, the resolution is generally a lot lower than what you might expect for the way that I'm talking. But the reason for that is we want to have something that loads on computers in Sudan. We want people in Cambodia to see the work that they completed with us and not just take credit for it while they continue on with their day at home. Vice versa, we want to make sure that the data is in the hands of the people that need it, that use it. And we want to make sure that all of the partners feel like they got what they expected out of working with us. It's never perfect, but that shared passion, I think everybody at CyArk wants to do right by our partners. And that's exciting because when you're working for a large organization and 3 bosses up, if they're just stamping the checks, they don't care whether or not you fulfilled your promises on the ground in Central Africa. They go, what do you mean? The project's done. No, I don't want you going back out there. You have something else to do. And it doesn't matter how many promises you made. If that's the end of the story, that's the end of the story. So CyArk's been really fantastic at that.
To what extent does CyArk focus on the future, on just what's coming? That could be innovation, geopolitics, climate, conflict?
Sure. We definitely try to stay less on the politics and more on the offerings. We are here to tell the stories of sites that want their story told in their words. And however we can best do that is how we're going to do it. I'm really excited because we've been pioneering Gaussian Splats as a digital twin archive.
Great.
And that tapestry product that I've mentioned a couple of times, these virtual tours, we are on the cusp of having absolutely lifelike experiences loading faster than super low resolution models. And I know Gaussian splatting, for those in the industry, is maybe not, it's not a secret and it's not a mystery, but I think not many people have found a way to utilize it in a way that's productive for a lot of things. The lack of underlying mesh is pretty difficult to use it for most of what both the VFX industry and the scanning industry want. But for what we do, it's perfect. And so we're really excited to kind of be able to transition to being on the cutting edge for places, you know, when you talk what we just discussed, Pond Farm. This is a pottery studio that's in Northern California that's like a little, you know, stepchild of the California State Parks program. They are not going to be getting VFX level scanning cheap enough to make it ever worth it. That story will never be told on the cutting edge. CyArk's amazing gift is to be able to take cutting edge technology and as a nonprofit apply it to sites that would never have that story told to that degree. So we've already had amazing results. I've been doing scanning. We're using both XGrid's Portal Cam. We've been using our own processing with PostShot and others, and are actually going to be hosting on our own platform all of these Gaussian Splat tours in the future, along with a lot of other tech. But it's really coming around, and within the next year, I think what people think of as a CyArk scan is going to be more or less 0 to 100 in difference.
Far out. You mentioned earlier how, I mean, Chris, you're busy and you're off the grid. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you aren't the first to recognize a new development or upgrade or release. Mm-hmm. Were you the first to embrace Gaussian splatting? Did someone else engender that within CyArk, or how'd that come to be?
At CyArk. So at CyArk, the nice part is we're all pretty passionate about it. So I'll definitely be the one to want the next camera to play with. Fully admit that happily. I'm the guy who gets the boots on the ground, so it's fun for me to use the new toys. Our CEO, John Rosevsky, along with really the whole staff, are pretty tech forward and are always looking for new developments.
Great.
We don't have, though, the privilege of R&D money the way that a VFX studio does.
Sure.
And so we just have to be very, very particular about the things that we test and the limits that we push. So Gaussian splatting has been fantastic. That was something we took the risk on. We got the first run of portal cams out because we go, you know what? If it works, it's worth it. But there's plenty of things that I wish that we could do, but it just doesn't make sense because if it didn't work in our workflow, we'd be out more money that we could have used for actually, helping a site.
Were you to just hypothesize of the 100% percentage pie between photogrammetry and Gaussian splatting at this juncture, how would you say it's divvied up?
So funny enough, much to my chagrin, we do both 100%. So I will do a full photogrammetry model, a full LiDAR model, and a full Gaussian splat scan of a site.
Let's go.
Right? Yeah. So we've gotten, to toot my own horn here.
Please.
I would challenge just about anybody on speed, capture, efficiency with accuracy. I've been running this game since 2016 or 17. 8 months of the year actually in the field scanning with a new challenge every time, whether it's humidity or snow or, underground or underwater or, drones allowed, drones not allowed. Oh, this tech can't go in. They won't get the import permits. The embassy won't allow us to use this camera. So I think I've tried just about every way there is to scan and have learned more or less what works. So we're doing all of that in 2 to 3 days worth of capture for these multi-acre sites sometimes. am the team that I work with being the reason, not just myself. But we're good. We're good at doing it quick, and we're good at being efficient. And so, yeah, we do all of it because we might use Gaussian splatting, but the site might want a preservation level model of the pottery wheel or of the main statue or of the sacred shrine. And if we only have Gaussian splatting and we say, sorry, that's just not what the tech does, that to us is not what we're looking for. So we try to work with the site to say, hey, do you need this? Do you need that? For California state parks, they also want to do VR experiences, and they don't use Gaussian splats right now. They want 3D models. So we do both.
Yep. What knowledge, what prowess. CyArk's.
I was going to say that's very kind of you, but as anybody who does this knows, it's a lot of time of silently listening to a podcast like this one while you move a tripod ever so gently, one step at a time, for 72 straight hours. And so prowess really sounds exciting in the moment, and then somebody comes on site, oh, we'd love to see you guys work. And it's just like, hey, I'm going to silently stare at this wall for the next 2 to 6 hours. You're welcome to hang out, but like I'd go get lunch.
Yeah. Chris, CyArk's biggest impediment: time, access, funding, or trust?
Oh, again, I mean, I hate to say depends. I think that's a cop out. But it does. Every site is different. I think that we've worked really hard to create a name for ourselves in the last few years that shows the trust has been easier to earn every week, every project.
Great.
As we keep going. So that part has, and trust shouldn't be earned in that respect. It should be something that you prove each and every time. We try our best. But it's been easier. Funding is always a challenge. We accept donations on our website. We're a 501c3. We're funded because people believe in our mission. And while we get to partner with cool organizations and sometimes governments and sometimes, companies, generally we are always looking for funding sources that can stabilize enough to create a partnership with a place, because doing these one-off scans is exciting, but being able to work with the community and tell their story over multiple years is always more rewarding and always creates a better product. So I would say funding is probably our number one challenge at all times.
I want to circle back, Chris, to this notion of predictability is too strong a term, but maybe anticipation. And I'm thinking about, like I just watched the Alex Honnold thing, the climb in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And there's all this underlying tension with whatever China may or may not do in the coming years. And just, again, that finger on the pulse of what may come to be, however disturbing it might be. Does CyArk pay mind to that and maybe shuffle, maybe not a priority list, but, we need to keep greater, deeper tabs on XYZ region or place?
No, at least not in the way that I think you're thinking about it.
Okay.
We'll definitely put that value element if someone reaches out to us and says, hey, this is the reason.
Got it.
And a lot of our grant proposals have to be based in some need, and that creates need. If there is geopolitical tension or threat of destruction, that site has a greater need, and it's usually easier to find funding because of that. But we are not, as an organization, we're a small team, and generally we're working with whoever's out there that wants to work with us. And if that's a California state park that generally is going to continue operating, whether or not we go there, or if that's a tomb in Sudan that it was, a civil war 2 weeks after we left. The reality is we're going to go where there's work to be done. And we don't confine that work just to kind of the dramatic, whether, again, that's climate change or conflict. However, I will add, we do very much pay attention to geopolitical issues, because as traveling as an American, sometimes in conjunction with a State Department or an embassy or a private company that has a reputation, into places with sometimes tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of camera gear, If you're not paying attention to what that means, then you don't belong in this particular career field. It's very easy to teach someone to 3D scan. It is very hard to teach people to travel well, and travel responsibly. So that's where I put my focus. That's where we focused on hiring employees. That's how we conduct our field work.
Is there a risk that digital preservation stymies the urgency to protect the physical original?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't think that digital preservation has been successful enough to truly know that answer. It's kind of like saying, has the advent of the digital camera taken away our desire to, go do fun things if you can just see the fun things? I guess you generally know. We do it differently. Now everybody's got a camera out and might not, arguably doesn't enjoy it as much as they used to. But for digital heritage, I think that the vast majority of experience has been people get excited when they see something they didn't know and they want to know more if they are excited. So if you can create an exciting story, an exciting product, I don't see less engagement. I see more. The example I give is generally people don't watch a wildlife documentary and then say, man, now I don't have to go on safari. You go, oh my God, I want to go see what this is. I want to go see the lions in person. Nobody just gives up on that. And we see it time and time again. We're creating a cool narrative and a cool 3D tour and a cool experience with our tapestry, has gotten people to be more engaged with sometimes the partner organizations like Petra National Trust or places that preserve these sites, for example. And then also we see people indicating more desire to go visit the place in person. So I hope not, but I think it's too early to tell because I don't think digital twinning has been good enough to replace the real thing. If Gaussian Splats take off in 10 years down the line, we want to have another conversation, maybe. But so far, no, I guess would be my answer.
Great. We've touched on the evolution of CyArk, where it was maybe when you joined, where it is now. Mm-hmm. Care to share, if you know, or even speculate what the next stage of evolution might be for CyArk in the coming years, the next decade?
Yeah, we try to really talk about where we're going on a regular basis because we have to operate in such a slim margin space. As a nonprofit, you don't get to pretend that things will always be what they are. You have to be ready for funding sources to change, for tech to evolve. And we've been staring down the barrel of rapid documentation for a while. It used to be that LiDAR scanning was something that we provided and had to tell people and educate them what we even did. The concept of coming to a site and saying, hey, well, we can laser scan your site. People would go, we don't need that. We don't even know what that is. And you go, oh, well, it's this cool new tech. And they go, okay, fine. Now, if you go to a cultural heritage conference and you say, oh, we can do LiDAR scanning, go, we've LiDAR scanned it every other year as part of a universe. Everybody knows what that is. So we're very versed with looking forward. The evolution of where we're going, I think, is going to be very, very dramatically shifted into storytelling as the tech and the finesse around capture disappears. And as someone who specializes in that, I know that my, expertise becomes less valuable as the tech gets better. And that's okay with me. I would rather cultural heritage globally get better protected instead of just gatekeeping of, I know how to do photogrammetry better than anybody, or better than the next guy. It's not worth it. It's better that people can take these scans and make digital copies of places. On the flip side, I think what's going to change in value and what CyArk provides is experts in production, experts in video, experts in photo, in partnerships, in creating funding sources and respecting narratives. All of that is very hard to do if you're a guy with a camera. speaking as a guy with a camera. I can go create a 3D scan of any place and it will be lifeless and it probably will not make the people there happy. But with CyArk, we're able to go, okay, 2-3 days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on the site. We'll have a 3D scan. That's the easy part. The hard part is all this other work and making sure everybody's respected. So that to me has been a change because I used to get hired on purely 3D scanning, and that seems like a closing window.
3 adjectives that describe CyArk Chairman and CEO John Rostevsky.
Ooh, that's a dangerous question as an employee. Luckily, not dangerous for John. John is very kind. He's very passionate. And I think that he is very driven. And I hesitate because passion and drive are kind of in the same realm and don't encapsulate maybe all the different factors. But John has really taken what was a difficult transition, I think, for CyArk. It was very risky of us to go from what was kind of a cultural heritage nonprofit in scanning and documentation and, science, and turn it into a storytelling platform. That is not a successful plan for most organizations. And he's rocked it. And I think that's because he saw the vision and was passionate enough about it to code a whole lot of it himself. He is not a figurehead. He's very much in the trenches with us. But he also cares enough about the product to really, really want it to succeed. And people see that, which then makes the sales part of our job of like actually approaching sites way easier, because we've all been on a phone call with someone who doesn't believe in their product, and it's real tough to get everybody to the table after that. And we just don't have that problem. And then he wants to do right by the partner. Again, I don't work with people that I don't feel have the people that we travel to's best needs. I'm lucky enough that at this stage of my career, I don't need to be working with people who aren't respecting the needs of others, and it's never been a problem.
Yep. Terrific. Who is Chris Whitesides?
Chris Whitesides is a great friend of mine and also the field lead with me on just about every project that we do.
Okay.
And so you could have this interview and more or less swap myself, Chris Millbern, with Chris Whitesides. And yes, we abuse the hell out of that easy joke. It is we got called on it actually recently, where we told, we were both named Chris. We make it easy. You guys only need to remember one name. Somebody just goes, man, how many times have you told that joke? It was just like every single time in every country on earth at this point. But it gets a sympathy laugh, which we're always good for.
Yeah.
But Chris Whitesides is a very intelligent and capable 3D scanner who, like I said, he actually was a backpacking guide with me back at UCLA, where I went to college, and we stayed in touch, and I ended up calling him up because we had a couple of different field projects that were just brutal, whether it was just conditions, heat, carrying capacity. A lot of our sites are foot traffic only, and a lot of them are on top of mountains, just something that happens.
Yep.
And I go, you know what? I think I can teach someone to 3D scan a lot better than I can teach them to be able to do this part. And he was the best guy in my Rolodex of like, I need someone I can travel with day in and day out and not hate at the end of the day when everything's hot and miserable. And he was that guy, and he's been very successful in that capacity, and now does a lot of our post-processing too in certain capacities. So huge friend of mine, but also just very capable 3D scanner.
Salute, Mr. Whitesides.
Yeah.
What's the most important trait for CyArk fieldwork?
Absolutely. I was going to say toughness, but it's not always true. That's the average, if you will.
Okay.
But there is I think meticulousness would probably be a better word.
Great.
The CyArk fieldwork, as I've described now multiple times, is not for the faint of heart. Not because it's the whirlwind Indiana Jones adventure, but because you need to photograph the undersides of tables, not just the top sides. And if I can't trust you to 3 days later check back in and say, yes, I did actually photograph the ceilings. Yes, I did actually photograph the dirt outside the doorway so that that looks good. I need someone who knows that there will always be something missing and their intention is to go find it and fix it. Good enough is not something that we like to behold. So meticulousness is probably the number one.
People of standards. Love it. Chris, what was an ethical dilemma you've encountered on the CyArk project?
An ethical dilemma. I think a tough one that we always have is that there's usually a good amount of conflict in preservation as a whole. When we talk about nature reserves or historical landmarks, you can look in any country, let alone any city's records, and there's usually a healthy debate, and sometimes violence, depending on the place, about whether or not people were allowed to live there, whether or not people were allowed to create businesses that operate on behalf of or within certain sites, who gets to control it, is it political, who's actually in charge, who gets to make money, all of these things. And CyArk has a lot of challenge finding out really how do we get permission to do something and make sure that that's enough. Because I can very much pay for permission to scan or spend time in places that everybody on that site when I'm there in person would not want me there doing the work that I'm doing. And I think it's very easy for people, and I've seen it, and I think early in my career at times was a part of it, where you go, no, we have permission. And they go, yeah, we know, we don't have any say in that. That's some guy in a different city who signed that paper. And you guys doing this means that our local team doesn't get to do it. And they didn't pay us because they're paying you. That doesn't really happen with CyArk, but some previous projects. And you go, but we have permission. Isn't that enough? No, like that's ethically, that's not enough. You need to have buy-in from the people who are involved with the site, who are telling the story. And so we work really hard to go, okay, we know what the government said, or we know what the site authority said, or we know what the people on the phone call said. What about the people who live there? What about the people who, and that gets, because you're never going to make everybody happy, but trying to even just tip the 50% can kill a lot of projects that seem really promising.
Okay, Chris, this is the last one. You don't have to answer on CyArk if you choose not to. But I'm all too curious if there's a CyArk project that sticks with you more than any other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not just one, but there's been a number of projects where I've both made connections or seen challenges that you go, man, like I wish I could do 1,000% more. I think we've done projects in Somaliland and Sudan where the amount of resources is so low and the dedication and capacity is so high, and it's heartbreaking to only be able to meet 2% of that capacity's ability, because the resources that we're just delivering, we're a nonprofit. We can do, a site scan. We can teach how to use a camera. We got a week, maybe 2 weeks maximum. But if someone could just set up shop and, teach for a month or, 3 months and deliver some better equipment, some of these guys would be absolutely leading, Hollywood VFX studios in 5 years, 10 years. The amount of drive that it takes to be in Somaliland and still care enough about your cultural heritage to take time out of your day, or the ability to make money, or the ability to, be with your family and go out to a site and work on it every day. It's very easy for people, I think, in the US and most Western countries to visualize that. And it is absolutely life-changing amounts of resources for some of these people to attend classes or to work on these projects. And so I always try to drive home the point when we do contracting or talk with other organizations that are maybe interested in working in these places, that when they go, it's easier for us to just do it. we'll just get it done. Or I don't know if we should work, the local team, they don't speak English super well. I don't know if they'll get it. Like, as long as you do your due diligence of knowing who you're selecting, there are people out there that not only get it, but if you just give them a fraction of the resources that you have at your disposal, they will do it better than you will in a week. And I've seen it time and time again. And so for any of those that are watching that want to work internationally, please try to engage a local university, have them do a site visit, have them help you. Do anything you can to engage those partnerships, because you will be surprised every time. And a lack of language barrier or a language barrier or lack of communication is usually not as big of a barrier as people think it is, especially for things like 3D and photogrammetry, because the truth is nobody understands a Sony menu, whether or not you speak English. It's difficult either way. You might as well just go, this is the button you press, this is how to do it. Watch me. Some of these guys and these girls will pick it up so fast, much faster than people that have taught in more formal capacities.
Wow.
So
that's inspiring, man.
The desire to learn is there. So, any of those projects that I feel, Sudan, Trinidad, just the best people.
Glorious. Okay, Chris, I'd love to talk just 10,000 foot tech and photography actually for a few minutes before you even begin a project. I mean, to what extent do you try to lock down workflows? Here's XYZ plan versus leaving room for improvisation.
That's a great question. We absolutely pre-plan our sites. We create diagrams, maps. We go, we're going to scan this building, this interior. We're not going to scan that outhouse. We clear that with the partners ahead of time, because I think scope creep is probably the number one killer of 3D scanning projects. Excuse me. The tech is pretty dialed in at this point. I think with the exception of Gaussian splatting, where whether we're going to integrate drone data and how well that's going to mesh with the lighting conditions on site, and whether or not we decide to use a certain camera, that's about as far, and I can get into details of that, but that's about as far as like equipment selection goes, where it's not pre-planned, where there's that improvisation. We know very well at this point what lighting is necessary, if at all. We know what a site is going to look like in winter. We've just done it so many times, and where the sun's going to be, and whether it's a cloudy day, we check the weather. So I would say we're pretty locked in on how we approach this place.
Excellent. Do you yourself pilot drones on occasion?
Yeah. I've been a drone pilot since, I don't know. Well, we were building drones before DJI was really the global leader.
Okay.
So I've been flying drones professionally for a long, long time, and I would laughingly, I'm sure there's always somebody who's going to beat you, but I've probably flown a Mavic 3, or at least a Mavic of any kind, more hours than most people have, because we use the Mavic for a lot of projects, but in general, drones, not just as a survey tool, we do 3D scanning up close. I'll fly 10 centimeters off a building if it requires macro photogrammetry. And you do that over enough sites, and we're logging, 20 hours of flying in a project, every project.
Great. Beyond just probably always developing ability to just intuit, how do you know when a site has been captured enough?
See, this is a very funny question. The reason I'm laughing is because I think my coworkers have been trying to extract that information from me for about my entire career.
And by the way, if it is just intuition, that is fine as well.
It kind of is. I mean, there's obviously ways to measure it and to answer. The funny thing is that the ways to measure it generally take a lot longer than just over capturing by about 15%. And so instead of waiting for my RC project to launch and go, oh, did we get everything? I have now developed a pretty uncanny ability, and I'm wrong sometimes, to be very clear. I'm not some savant at this at all. It's more just like anybody who's done any task 10,000 times generally just knows when they're done. We kind of laughingly will work right up until the finish line, and somebody will go, okay, do you get it all? And I go, oh, I think we missed the underside of one chair in the back of room number 8. They go like, wasn't that Monday? Like that was 5 days ago we were in that room. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't circle back around to it, but I don't think it'll make a difference. It's pretty, I don't think we've had a true like data mishap in a very long time. But that said, we do field verification. We have LiDAR maps, which is really nice. So Chris Whitesides, you mentioned earlier, will do verification and alignment of all the LiDAR on site every night. We basically tend to work all daytime hours scanning, and then we go back to a hotel or an Airbnb or a hut sometimes, depending on where we're at, a tent in certain cases, and we'll run a laptop off of a car battery, and we will align the project and try to check our work, because it's just good practice, not good practices in getting better, but rather I never want a client to not get what they either paid for or allowed to happen. And as much as I'd like to believe my own ego, we're all fallible. So while I feel like I intuit it, we still track.
Golden. Your CyArk bio says you are involved with designing data capture techniques. Can you elaborate on this design?
Yeah, I think it's not just one design, but rather we've tested just about every camera type and every method of, I would say photogrammetry has the most amount of room for innovation, or used to, until Gaussian splatting and nerfs started coming along. But the data workflow of not only how to capture, but okay, which hard drives are the fastest to be able to copy things by the time that you're out shooting the next day. How do you do this with a 1-man team, a 2-man team, a 3-man team effectively? How do you light a cave evenly so that you're still preserving the color temperature and still making sure that all of your photos are scientifically accurate, not just look good? All of these things require some amount of testing. And while I'd say now there's a pretty good amount of material online, I generally don't feel like there's one central way to do things successfully. And you really do have to know and invent new ways depending on the site. There is no such thing as a catch-all strategy for these buildings. I've worked in places where the floor will be collapsed on one half of the building. It's not safe to get there. Okay, how do you keep your same texel resolution across that room without being able to step on that ground? Well, you switch to, a different lens. Okay, now you've got a 50 millimeter on, but now your depth of field is different. And okay, well, we need to fix the depth of field program, and we can't walk around to the side. Well, we could do the drone, but the drone needs to be indoors, but then the lighting's different because you're now away from where you put the lights. What if we put a light on the drone? There's just 10 levels of every place where there's some kind of mystery, and we try to keep a consistent product. And a consistent underlying data. I don't think it always comes out in our virtual tours, which are pretty low resolution, again, because we need to have a global audience and let people be able to see it. But yeah, to summarize, I think a lot of the designing of workflow is trial and error, and then finding the most efficient capture method.
Yeah. I mean, the old 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a moment on a site where the data was perfect, but the story felt incomplete?
Yeah, I think yes, what I'll say is that CyArk has gotten a contract for different companies, and will sometimes get hired to do a 3D scan that is not on our Tapestry platform, that is not part of the larger story that we like to tell for most of our projects. And I've definitely seen it where the story that could be told doesn't get told, because that's just not part of the job operation. But I'd say the larger thing is there are people that I think get really bogged down in telling what's been told and do not want to include new information. And I don't have a specific example of this, but what I mean by that is if you go to a site that has people living on it and it's an active cultural heritage site, it's part of the community, there's usually a story that is on the plaque or on the sign or is in the Wikipedia article. And that is by and large usually correct. But there's also a story of the people who live there, right? And if somebody says, hey, I love waking up every morning and hearing the sound of these animals over the ridge, that's something that if you only read the Wikipedia site, you don't know what animals live there. You don't know what they sound like. It's missing context. And I feel like we've had a couple of projects where somebody who's in charge kind of goes, well, you don't need to interview them. They don't know anything. Oh, no. You just talk to this expert that lives in this other city. They'll give you all the history you need. No, why even bother? And you go, because there's always more information out there, and subjective does not mean wrong. It adds to the story. We're not history tellers. We're not teachers. We have some, ex-teachers on staff, but we're not creating a narrative. We're letting the people drive that. So that's that. We've had a handful of projects where I feel like that's kind of happened.
What's your earliest memory of a technology wowing you?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I liked photography. I'll give you a funny story. So when I was very young, my parents took me to a play that was like a Muppets play. And we go through the whole show, and one of the characters in that play was a stranger with a gun. And that character was obviously like the bad guy that you're supposed to learn to be afraid of as like a 4-year-old or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really get what was going on. As far as I was concerned, I think that was the only human that was part of the play, right? And so later on the elevator, coming home, like getting out of the theater, a nice old lady walked in with my parents and me and goes, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And just looked her dead in the eye. I go, "A stranger with a gun." And the look of horror really resonated. And
she pulls out her FBI badge.
Yeah, exactly. He's a point to the story, which is that my parents go, "No, like we need to ask you this question and get you to have because if you keep repeating this, like we're going to jail pretty soon, right?" And I somehow deep down went, I want to be a photographer. It's always been something I've wanted to do. And by age, I don't know, 9, my answer always was National Geographic photographer. Just was. And so my first realization that technology played a part in that was I had a film camera that I would take photos of, and we'd go to the zoo and I would just sit for hours wanting to try to take the best photo, but you only get 24 shots, 26 shots, it depends on the film roll, right? And when the first digital camera got into my hands and somebody kind of says like, "Oh, you could just keep taking them." What do you mean film? The idea of like, all right, I can get behind this. You mean I can obsess forever and try to take the perfect thing and lose all of my time and, wow, years of my life trying to, like, it's perfect for me because that's the kind of guy I am. I'm meticulous and I want to get it right. And I think seeing how that changed my ability to do something made me very, very keen to always try to be on that tech forefront. And my dad was the guy that was, installing custom computer programs on, the absolute earliest PCs that existed. He was always, and he was an electrical engineer that gave me that underlying love of the like, hey, but how does it actually work?
Circuitry kind of a thing. Yep.
Yeah. And that allowed me to kind of be the person I am now, which is somebody goes, "Okay, this is how the camera operates and here's how to do it." And I go, "Great. Why?" You go, "What do you mean? Why? Well, why does it work? Can it work better? What if we do this?" And it just never stopped.
I'm not going to allow this humility to pass because, Chris, you mentioned, I think it was age 9, you said you dreamt of being National Geographic photographer.
Yeah.
You became this, correct? You've shot for National Geographic.
I want to keep that thread of humility because I'm very good friends with people that I would consider actual National Geographic photographers.
That's
the guys
fair.
that have been staff photographers for years
Sure.
and that I've gotten to train with. I have worked as a photographer for National Geographic. Yes. I got to click that milestone. I'm very proud and very happy about it. But I think that everybody at National Geographic would laugh very heartily when we kind of sit around and I go, yeah, but like there's levels. There's
That's
always
fine.
level.
Maybe an asterisk, but that's okay. I'm curious, can you speak to just what that work process entails? I mean, is it
Sure.
pressure mounted? Is there an element of stress that because of just the, I don't want to say reverence, but it's a very esteemed, it's an institution for goodness sake, right? Like, so
Yeah.
how was that experience?
I think stress is a great way to put it. It's positive stress.
Yeah.
It makes you want to try very hard, and it makes you want to get the best shot. And a lot of times the really nice part of the way that I got to engage with National Geographic and a lot of the filmmaking that I got to be a part of is I was usually one of a couple of people there to do a project that also I was taking photos for. And so when we worked in DRC, I'm working with a great friend of mine who was part of African Parks, and they needed a gunshot detection system and a weather station built. And we go, okay, we're going to go out to this forward operating base and we're going to build that. And while we do it, I'll take some photos. You know, my job was kind of like run around and also document this. And when we do a 3D scan of all of Chichen Itza, that I got to also take the media photos and it got to be part of a story. There's a bit of relaxation when you've got a purpose that isn't just get the best photo. And I get to have a little bit of a defense that it's like an excuse where you go, oh, I didn't get the shot, but that's because I was doing this other thing and we actually accomplished something. It wasn't just for the shot. On the flip side, I think, though, that made it really hard for me because usually being a photographer and getting something done are counterintuitive. Your job is to be an observer who does not participate. You need to capture the moment. But if the moment is you and one other person doing something, really tough to like work with one hand and camera in the other, get the perfect shot, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I lost a couple years off my life on one or two of those where somebody goes, we get like a call from Nat Geo a week before we're leaving and we go, hey, we know that you guys are doing this project and it's your staff just for 3D scanning. Could somebody also film a 360 video and take stills? And if you could do a video interview of this guy that we could use in a different movie. And when you're young and you're, impressed by the title, you go, absolutely, whatever you want. And the regret in the moment of like, it's 2 a.m. and you're like, I said I'd do a star lapse outside, but the hippo's outside and, they're never going to hire me again if I don't get it. That kind of thing, I think almost damn near killed me. And I'm very happy to be generally out of that stress sphere for most of the work for CyArk.
That eager to please rookie mode, huh?
Terrible.
What
it's a curse. Any rookie out there that's listening to this, it's okay to say, I can't do that. I need more resources. It's okay. Like, be honest.
Oh goodness. Chris, is there anything you believe should not be digitized?
Yes. I say that with some hesitancy because I don't think I'm the one to declare that. I think of myself as a plumber with a camera. I'm good at what I do, and somebody wants me to fix something, I'll fix it. But I truly believe that digitizing things that people don't want digitized is the same as taking something that somebody doesn't want taken. Everybody says what they do is harmless. I mean, across all spheres, all cultures. That's just, we like to believe that we're good people and we like to believe that we're doing good things. And if we get hired to do something, we're generally going to do it. And if somebody's not happy with it, you go, yeah, but they don't really get it. It's not that big of a deal. And I think digitization is very liable to that because it is so harmless from a functional physical standpoint. We're not touching the stuff usually. We're not messing with it. It doesn't take away from the fact that the item's still there. We're not putting it in a museum instead of in, on a shrine, something like that. But places have real meaning to people. And those places need to be respected in the way that those people want it respected. And I know that I don't have a perfect track record of this because, again, when we talked about the conflicts that sometimes happen between site administrators, physical realities, there can be stakeholders, local people who go, we don't want this digitized. And then the person who's in charge of protecting it saying it's falling into the ocean. And we need it digitized. My job isn't necessarily to navigate that every time, but I know that there's absolutely places in my career where I wish I'd reflected more on that, or maybe would have thought twice. However, I think we're about the best that there is at trying to respect every option. And we have absolutely 1,000 times over, I've seen it where somebody goes, hey, we just don't want you to digitize the main shrine and the entire reason that you guys are out here. And it's the only part of this building that's historical. And you go, oh, you sure? And they go, yep, like that's the sacred shrine, or that's the temple, or that's the special rock. And you go, okay, like you're sure. And the reason I say that is I'd say about 50% of the time, by the time that we're a day away from ending the project, we will be invited by the local community to document whatever that site is. Because we have earned the trust where they see the care and the integration that we're trying to find with the partners of, we're not filming a movie for Hollywood, because most people don't really get why we're out there. That's not communicated all the time. And so when they go, oh man, these guys actually care about protecting this place, come on in, 100%. And the other 50%, there's usually a very good reason that they don't want to digitize that. And we try to respect that every single time. And I encourage anybody that's listening to this, it feels fun when you're either young or you're kind of an amateur that's doing something as a side project. When you get to take the photo in the place you're not allowed to take photos, or you're the one who gets to post on social media, like, nobody gets to see this. Like I've pulled back the curtain. Understanding that feels good for about 5 minutes and can be absolutely devastating to people that you don't know you're hurting is tough. And the more that you can try to respect that in all capacities, the easier this work gets done for everybody for 100 years from now. Because any place that's been burned by one person, 10 times is harder to get that place properly documented or protected. Because they rightly so just don't trust going forward.
Exactly. Ultimate burning of a bridge, huh? Mm-hmm. A couple more on technology, Chris, but just through a lens of teaching, which we've touched on lightly. And I'm curious if you believe that everyone can learn reality capture, or if maybe like language learning or maybe dancing, that there is, even if the answer is yes, a sort of ceiling for everybody.
So the answer is absolutely yes. Everybody can learn to use what feels like very complicated software programs. I have taught someone how to use a mouse, and by the end of the week, they have been able to make a 3D model. So I don't think that there is a technical capability floor. Ceiling, I think maybe is a different argument, but floor, none. Truly, like zero language, zero anything, just show and tell, and maybe translated through somebody. We've been able to get people to make 3D models. And I think the ceiling is interest. And I think that goes for a lot of tech, right? Like if someone is not passionate about something, you will not, somebody who hates golf is not going to win a tour. Like it just takes too much time that if you absolutely hate it, you're not going to want to perfect it. And software programs, I think, are that level of technicality and kind of misery, where even if the UI is perfect, ultimately it takes a while to get something down. So that ceiling, absolutely. If people are uninterested, I think it's best to instead show them what you're doing and say, do you want me to do this, or do you want to learn how to do this? Because if they don't want to learn how to do it, you're wasting both of your time, right? And we've had that a couple of times where we've had trainees who go, look, I'm actually here because I love this place and I want to protect the story. I hate cameras. I hate tech. I don't really want to learn. And you go, great. Can you find me people to interview? And like, can you interview them in your local language? yeah, oh, I'd love to do that. And you go,
How
great. Like
resourceful. That's so
yeah.
cool.
So that, and by the way, yeah, sorry, something I wanted to mention, we have really pioneered every tour that we do. We generally try to film fully in the local language as well as English. And we will have captions at the very least for any of our sites in the local dialects, which sometimes takes forever.
I'm gonna applaud and second that. I was wowed. If I could just this slight
Sure.
personal tangent. My fiance is Bosnian, and I had seen on site there was the National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they
Yeah.
had in the language in the native tongue. I was floored.
Yeah.
So kudos.
I'm so glad to hear people appreciate that because, well, we get that obviously from the partners who expect it because we've come in saying that we'll do that. It takes a lot of time sometimes. And
Yeah.
oh, you just use AI. No, like AI exists for about 5 languages reliably. And of that, it's usually still not perfect. Working with translators back and forth, the amount of changes, I mean, Central African Arabic is basically a different language to, a traditional Arabic or an Iranian Arabic.
Yeah.
And we've had laughing conversations where we've sent translations for review and somebody goes, how do I put this? It's as if you filmed like an old English shopkeeper narrating this or like Shakespeare, like it's like technically everything that you said is correct in your tour, but like it sounds like a comedy character giving an old English version. I don't think this is what you meant to do. And we go, we hired a translator. I don't know what to tell you. And so it takes sometimes like 6-7 times to get just right. And we try really hard.
But that really, really instantiates, I mean, the earlier point about the CyArk meticulous approach, right? That attention to detail. And that's, damn, man, that's so honorable. So the last one on just teaching, I'm just curious to pick your brain on this, whether it be for someone's 55-year-old colleague or their 10-year-old daughter, any advice you would impart on just teaching, scanning, capture, photogrammetry, and just that approach of education?
Yeah. I would say for those, so we run paid trainings that if anybody out there listening either really wants to learn how to do this right, or wants to know more or really how to teach it, that's something that you can absolutely engage us on and find on our website. The lesson, though, the nice part of working for a nonprofit while we offer these paid trainings, I hope that I'm out of a job one day because every site is scanned perfectly and we have no more stories to tell. I'm always happy to share as much as I can. And I'd say the tenet that works best for me is for people who have not used advanced softwares in 3D scanning before, the concept of the computer as a third party to the work is one of the best ways we found to teach this. And what I mean by that is you don't want to treat the software like a set of steps, because when it doesn't work, then people go, the software isn't working. End of story. There's no way to troubleshoot that. It's just broken. Whereas if you teach it and you go, hey, your job as a 3D scanner is to teach the computer what it is you're looking at. The same way somebody behind a wall, if they can only hear your voice and you're trying to describe the object in your hands, you need to teach the computer, an unknowing, unintelligent, third party, what it is you're looking at. And that clicks for a lot of people that it's not like, oh, how many photos? Well, I don't, how many sentences to describe the apple in your hand? If it's a simple object, 1. If you've got a set of Legos, you might be there a while to describe the colors, the size, how the pieces work together, all that kind of thing. And any language, any age, any experience level, that makes more sense because then the computer is not broken when it doesn't work. You're going, I didn't teach it well enough. Let me go back and try this better. And nobody's perfect on first try, second try, but usually they start to really understand why things aren't working quickly. And we can usually get people from never used a professional camera on manual settings within a 5-6 day course where people are photographing full manual all exposure levels, doing their own photogrammetry models and producing them and exporting them on reality capture without us saying a single word. And I'm really proud of that, because it has opened the door to people who have gotten jobs, people who have gotten into universities, people who have founded companies based on our trainings, which is really exciting.
What a ripple effect. Terrific, Chris. Okay, Chris, I'd like to delve into some slightly personal questions. Just get to know the practitioner, Chris Millbern. You have many, many skills, physical and mental alike. Which one had the toughest learning curve?
That's an interesting one. I think if you're going to work in international expeditions or any kind of field work that is short term versus long term, the hardest thing for me to get down is routine and sleep. When we talk about jet lag, it's a real thing, and everybody's got their strategy. I found that most strategies fall apart on your fourth or fifth trip to a new time zone. You can only use those tricks and tips maybe once, maybe twice, and get away with it. By the time it's like week 5 in country 3, you tend to just be at the mercy of whatever your body or the sun is doing to you.
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten about as good as a human can be. And my wife is actually an ER doctor. And so it works really great sometimes because we can just coordinate on sleep schedules of, it'll be 2 a.m. where she's at. And for me, it'll mentally be 5 a.m., but it's actually set. And we just go like, yeah, I'll talk to you at 3, like we'll meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
But the takeaway of that is I think that's been the hardest thing to master, because I think for field work, it's very easy to see the finish line and just want to get there and run yourself ragged. And who cares if the equipment's clean? Who cares if everything's put away the same? Let's just get over the finish line. And I think professionally, you have to be able to elevate beyond that so that people can replicate.
How's your plane sleeping?
Actually, terrible. That's one of the worst things is
I'm with you.
Since I was a kid, I know it's so funny. Never been able to sleep on planes effectively. Just never was something that I got naturally. So it's a bit of a struggle, but I've learned very well on how to either sleep prior or during, every airline. I think I know the comfiest place to sleep in just about every airport major hub in the world. There's even some, I know people by name in a couple of the various like little, air clubs and check-in desks and stuff. Cause it's just, we do a lot of travel. Tried to dial it in.
What's the most danger you've ever been in?
In the course of scanning work, there's some obvious answers to that. And I try to shy away a little bit from telling just the pure danger stories, because I think it gives an unfair characterization of what is an overwhelmingly positive experience traveling to what people consider dangerous areas. I absolutely have had my run-ins, but the amount of times that I've traveled to a place that is considered an absolutely dangerous place to go and met the most wonderful people and had a great time.
Sure.
That's not to ignore the reality of bad things do happen. God knows, again, I worked on an ambulance. I know what bad luck can look like.
Yep.
And everybody's got their ticket to be punched here and there. But I really feel that danger is something that does not come around often, and generally people are pretty good. So just wanted that on the record. However, I'd say, like, ironically, some of the most fun that I've had has been doing projects in, like I said, we worked in the DRC on the militarized border of South Sudan, active firefights that break out there on a regular basis. And I'll give you one great funny story. I got tapped to go photograph an active deployment where they were deploying new Ranger kind of soldiers to this area and picking them up, and picking up the previous deployments who had been out in the bush maybe a week or two. And I'm in a old Russian military helicopter, and we're at, middle of DRC, flying out there. And as we're about to land to pick up the next cadre of soldiers, pilot radios back to me, and I'm sitting alone because we're going again to pick up some guys and switch them with other guys. And he goes, "Hey, I think I might have miscalculated the weight. I'm going to need to drop you off at the forward operating base." And we're like 2 minutes to touchdown. And I go, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he goes, "Don't worry, I'll come back and pick you up." And as we're having that discussion, he stopped. We land to pick up the first set of soldiers. And when I tell you, these are just the absolute toughest bastards that are on God's green earth.
Yep.
If you're going to be a wildlife ranger in the DRC, you are about as tough as a human can be physically and mentally.
Oh, yeah.
And these guys are running in full military kit. They're jumping to the helicopter, and they've done this, 100 times. And the facial expression of a guy who's been in the bush in a militarized, role, turns a corner, and there's essentially a small white child in the background looking just absolutely terrified. And they're just going like, "Who the hell is this guy? What are you doing?" And I've just got a little camera, taking pictures.
Say cheese.
Yeah, National Geographic. They're just like, you could just see one by one turn the corner. What are you doing, man? But they all speak French. They don't speak English, so I can't even communicate.
Oh.
I start just handing my camera down the line of, we're all kind of huddled in this cargo helicopter. Well, so then I get dropped off at the next forward operating base, and the pilot goes, "I'll be back." And I go, "When?" And then he goes starts taking off, disappears. And I'm just standing in, again, a forward operating base in a militarized zone.
Oh.
And I've got about 12 French African rangers who are living in their, they've essentially got little, foxholes that they put tents over.
Uh-huh.
And they just see me walk off the helicopter solo. They haven't been told what's going on. They don't get rated. This isn't the U.S. military, the Canadian military, where somebody's telling them what's happening and what. They just see this guy and they start speaking French. And I go, "Sorry, English only. Hello. I have no food, no backpack, no water." And it's just are we supposed to take care of this, essentially defenseless animal that's wandered into our camp or what? And so, again, universal communication, get everybody together for a group photo, because that will hopefully distract them from the reality of the situation, where I don't know, where that's going to be going. But got one of the best group photos of my absolute life, just nothing but guys in camouflage and AK-47s as far as the eye could see, and kind of made friends the best you can with hand gestures and facial expressions. And they were great. They were really nice to me, and got picked up a few hours later.
It was okay. I was going to ask. It was a few hours though. I mean, that
a few hours went by.
That's a heck of a pocket of time.
It's a really long time. I think it's very short compared, because I've been in dangerous situations for far longer. But the lack of knowledge of when something's going to end, your brain goes 1 hour. All right, I'm waiting 1 hour. 2 hours is when you go, this could be a week. There's a point where your brain kind of switches to I guess I'm in this for the long haul.
Yep.
But of course, they're professionals. They knew what they were doing. They are perfectly safe in the reality of it.
Oh, Chris, I gotta ask, do you still have? I mean, this photo, it still exists, and do you have?
I'll be sure to send that photo along. Definitely one of my favorites. But yeah, we've been in places that are. On the, we were in, like I said, Sudan a few weeks before the Civil War. And then a lot of the activities that I've done, I've fallen off of mountains. I've gotten, stuck in underwater caves here and there. And at a certain point, you kind of just, you try to make it worth it. If you're going to do something dangerous, it better be for a reason. Because I think while it makes for really good stories and it makes for really good media and excitement, I love telling a good cocktail story. The truth is if you're in real danger and something bad happens, it's bad for someone else, and usually someone else then has to put themselves in danger to respond to that. So making sure that if you're going to do something that's quote unquote dangerous, that you're doing it for a good reason, and that you understand the risks you're taking on behalf of somebody else. I think there's an ethical responsibility to that kind of, I'm doing something cool because it's dangerous.
Certainly. Your website hosts a quote from Andre Gilde. I won't pretend to know who that is. Man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. What is the most memorable display of courage you've seen?
Well, I can give you two answers. So the funny thing you bring up that quote is my father, when Google first allowed for custom website names, just grabbed one with my name on it and created a website for me when I was like in college, going like, I think you're going to do some cool things. And I think this is, something necessary.
Wow.
I still to this day don't pay for that domain or anything. It was like, and there was like a 1-year period where Google just said like, you for free, register this indefinitely, and didn't put in the contract terms that there was like an end to it. And he actually put that quote there. And he unfortunately passed away of cancer, but fought it for a very long time. And it was really pivotal because while that's, everybody knows someone who has been sick, who has gone through terminal illness in some capacity. And I don't think that that's a unique driver. I think that we see a lot of everyday courage and a lot of everyday strength that is not strong people conquering mountains, but rather everyday people continuing to do something despite it just sucking. And I think cultural heritage has a lot of that. It is very difficult to, on almost no budget and with very little attention, continue to preserve a site or a story. And I think every project, I end up being surprised that there is someone who shows up every day and will clean the doorway of the bathroom in a place in, Bangladesh. And that there is somebody who is going to maintain and operate in a small town in Vietnam, the local museum for rice farmers. And that to me, I think is more courageous, because for people like myself that are a little broken with that adrenaline junkie gene, courage seems really courageous, but really it's fun for us. Like I do enjoy doing some crazy stuff sometimes, and it can look courageous, but stupidity is a better word for it half the time, right? The people who are actually putting themselves in harm's way to protect things that may not even help them, but maybe will help their community in the long run. That's where I see that. So, long story short, having worked with so many very courageous people, tough people in the dramatic fashion, my appreciation for the undramatic has been elevated higher than I ever thought it would be.
You're, in essence, a guardian of sorts. How much do you think about whether or not the world will become more unstable?
Interesting. Well, before I let that pass, I describe myself, I think, as a plumber with a camera, and you're going with guardian. So we can meet in the middle somewhere, maybe. And I love a good plumber too. So, they've saved me a lot of money.
True heroes, no doubt.
No, is the world becoming more unstable? Yes, in a micro sense. I think politically, things are becoming the norms by which I live my travel life of like knowing who to apply what to, and generally how I'll be received, and what countries are going to be easier versus harder to work with. As an American, which is the only perspective that I can personally attest to, I think things are becoming much more unstable very quickly. And I would argue that that's a political reason. That's because of our current administration, but that's, I think, a much larger topic, and has a lot more nuance than I wish it had, because it'd be really nice if it was simple. The macro thing, though, what I was alluding to before of kind of like what's a dangerous country or a dangerous situation, things are very peaceful compared to history. And as long as you don't go looking for trouble, I think that stability on a larger scale is still very much there. I've been to places that are described as unstable, and the truth is if you're friendly and kind, you generally get treated the same way you would if it was a stable place. And so I don't know whether that means it's actually stable or whether instability is just more predictable than we think it is. And I know that's a maybe a high level philosophical answer for what is really a question on globally, where are we going? But I think I can't predict the future. I can just tell you that people across the globe are not happy with the quota that is being set for peacefulness. War is by far and away the most horrible thing, and the ease with which I think people are now talking about violence or power as a measuring force is just untenable, because nobody reacts well to it and nobody's happy about it, and that's expressed in every culture and every language.
What made ecological conservation important to you?
I think from an idealist standpoint, when I was really young, I love nature, I love animals. Why not protect it? We all love to protect the things that we're interested in. You could be interested in a card game and you'll fight to protect it and the ability to play it. I was interested in animals, and so I got interested in protecting nature. As I got older and the nuances of what preservation versus conservation versus public access versus resources, as that expanded, what my love of ecological preservation has come from is the understanding that, just like we talked about time capsules with 3D scanning, time capsules in nature are a way for us to really understand how far we've drifted, whether that is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. But if you don't have pristine areas with which to reflect upon, you don't know what you've lost. And if you don't know what you've lost, then you will absolutely lose all of it going forward. And I think we're pretty much seeing the tipping point in a lot of places right now of, you've lost all of it. What's happening? Bad things. Generally, it's if you don't have natural resources, you are going to be in trouble, whether it's water or land or, arable farms. All of this is at a baseline, a symbiosis with the planet. And ecologically speaking, you cannot afford to disregard that relationship. We'd all love to have nothing but, the best food immediately in front of us in every place in the world. And unfortunately, there's just not enough resources to go around for that to happen. And I think we're going to be learning, unfortunately, the consequences of a lot of ecological deregulation in the coming years and certainly decades.
We should just establish, and I think repeat, but you studied at UCLA Ecology and Environmental Biology, is that right?
Yeah, Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. Yeah.
Evolutionary Biology, apologies. From that experience, what today remains highly useful for you?
Oh, I think the understanding of why we write things down and study them. I think so many other fields in science are either proven, in that, when somebody says, hey, how do you do low-level math? Generally, we know what the correct answer is. And I think evolutionary biology and the theories within it have been absolutely proven time and time again, but they've been proven due to recent history that's very trackable in what we were wrong about, what we thought we were right about, then what we got wrong, and then what we fixed it with. And like the history of that science compared to most sciences is so concise comparatively. It still takes forever to learn, but comparatively very concise. You can learn very quickly why the scientific method works the way it does. And applying that scientific method to anything, I believe, is a much more successful way to go about working any job. Because again, if you go, why does this work? How does it work? And then you go, wait, does it actually work because of that? Or did I just introduce a variable that fixed it? I think any of us in the 3D scanning world know that we often feel at the mercy of the algorithms of our computer. And it's kind of a black box sometimes, more so now that we're introducing AI into this game with NERFs and Gaussian Splats. And being able to test a methodology, like actually, not just test it of, this worked, I'll do this again, but it's, why did it work? If we tweak one thing, does it still work? Like that kind of approach has, I think, made us much more successful in very quickly being able to adopt things into our workflow, and also avoiding catastrophe where people invite us into their homes, into their culture. We spend 2 weeks taking all of their time. And then if something didn't work and the 3D model doesn't come out, we'd be heartbroken. And I don't think that it's ethical to not know that you're going to be able to at least do the bare minimum that you promise. I like to pretend like we've never made mistakes. Absolutely not true. But I think we have a better record than most that go out and do this kind of work.
If you could relive one underwater experience, what would it be?
Oh, I mean, Antarctica is by far, I've worked, I want to say, in about 90 plus countries, maybe 100 at this point.
Jeez, man.
And I've gotten to work on all continents, but Antarctica was and still remains my favorite place I've ever been to. Just spectacular in a million different ways. And I got to go underwater there, and it just felt like living on an alien planet. If giving that answer got me back out to Antarctica, even if the underwater experience wasn't as stellar as it really was, I'd still probably say that. It's tough. There's so many. I encourage as many people as are able to do so. Try to get out in the water, because there's some cool stuff in there. I can talk at length, but we'd have a 7-hour episode very quickly if I started listing all my favorite underwater experiences.
Stellar answer nonetheless there. You have seen more of the planet than most people, as we have clearly established. The place that was the furthest from what you were expecting.
Oh, great. Great question. Sometimes I give talks, and I try to tell, I'm glad you said this, because I really try to talk about how much culture shock you can have in places that you think are next door, and how absolutely similar people are across the globe. Yes, of course, there's cultural differences. Of course, some places, are a little cold at first. Other people, don't want you to wear shoes inside. It's fair differences, right? All of that said, Mongolia surprised me the most in how at home I felt. Working in the capital city there, I could have been in Brooklyn in a half dozen ways. I mean, they have an amazing city there and are so forward with just like both technological advancement, but cultural sharing, very open to talk about, the things that they do and why they do it. And it just was so quick. And the reason I tell this is when we got off the airplane, and it was one of the most brutal series of flights to get out there in Ulaanbaatar, we get in the taxi cab out of the airport, and I haven't slept in, 27 hours or something like that. And a Sabrina Carpenter song started playing in the taxi cab, and you're 10 minutes into Mongolia, and you're going like, there's no way I'm listening to Sabrina Carpenter, like how has global culture translated this far? Like there's got to be a little bit of a difference, right? But no, like you can grab an Uber and you can listen to Sabrina Carpenter without any input, and you're in Mongolia. On the flip side, I've worked some projects. We've worked in New Orleans, and honestly, in the U.S. alone, tons and tons of different cultures and different ways of life. I think far more than people expect. And for, I think fairly, myself included, a lot of people, it's quite expensive to travel internationally. It's a huge privilege to be able to do so. Not great for the climate in a myriad of ways too, unless you're trying to do it for a purpose, and everybody has an argument on what that limit is. That being said, you don't have to fly across the world to have interesting travel experiences. I have had my most fun road trips within 100 miles of my house. And I've felt like I've had some of the craziest adventures doing so as well. you don't have to be the Nat Geo guy to be able to have crazy stories and adventures. So definitely goes both ways.
Oh, Chris, this has been a conversation that's going to stick with me for weeks, if not months. We're getting ready to put this car in park, though, and we like to end here with a quasi lightning round, if you will. Very fun themed. If my homework's right, you were raised on the VHS tape of Really Wild Animals Deep Sea Dive. Does that ring a bell?
That's absolutely correct. You've got my dolphin videos that still very excited that I've gotten to film them and participate in a way, full circle moments.
What would you say is the raddest marine species?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm pretty partial to sea lions. All my whale and shark friends would argue vehemently with the amount of marine biologists in my network. These could be fighting words depending, but I'm a big fan of sea lions because they're basically just underwater dogs, and you can play with them the same that you can on land.
What could you deliver a short TED Talk on that has nothing to do with what we've covered today?
Underwater gas physics, pressure physics. Maybe we've talked about that a little bit, but I am a huge nerd for like the chemistry of gases in blood and things like that, because that comes back from my hyperbaric days, and it's what kind of got me into diving. That doesn't mean I'm smart or good at it. It just means I did a lot of rote memorization back in the day and love to talk it.
Is this, pardon the complete novice question,
Sure.
Is this at least adjacent to the sensory deprivation realm?
No, quite different. I think there's some overlap in kind of the marketing and the markets that those take place in. But no, this is like think of a diving chamber that maybe you've seen in like commercial diving oil platform type rigs where people talk about repressurizing somebody. That's kind of the study of that physics is if you're underwater, you're in pressure. And if that pressure is not properly dealt with, whether it's how quickly you release it or release it too quickly, putting somebody back under pressure to treat them is where that medicine comes from. So we just put somebody in a tank and we pump it full of air, and because it's not flexible, the pressure goes up, and there's a million ways that it diverges from there. So there's your answer. There's your TED Talk.
I got a question dawned on me then off of this, if I may. I certainly did not plan for this. We know there's an extensive amount of the ocean that's just unexplored. Is that a problem that technology can solve?
Yes, absolutely. I've got great friends that work on a number of research vessels in a variety of ways, submarine pilots to, naval administrators to absolutely amazing science communicators. If anybody listening to this wants to look up something really cool, Nautilus is the research vessel and organization that runs this, and Megan Cook is a good friend of mine who does amazing science communication work. They are slowly but surely mapping the seafloor. They have ROVs, they have submarines, they have, huge sonar detectors at work, and they are exploring the deep ocean in a way that hasn't been done before. So yes, I believe technology can overcome that. The hope is just that, as always, we're using it for good. I believe they are, but there's definitely on the deep sea mining side, lots of tech that's allowing us to explore for ways that might be a little bit damaging in the long-term future. Who's to say? Yeah. But yeah, definitely something that's evolving.
1 to 10 scale, 10 being total optimist, 1 pessimist. Where do you stand on AI in the next 5 years?
That's a great question, because there's so many facets with the 3D scanning and relation to me personally. I'm a solid 5. I'm a very neutral. I think it is a tool. I think it is a technology, like the digital camera example that we talked about earlier. There is, pros and cons that come out of that. And, the pros are, wow, I get to take more photos. The cons are, nobody looks at the world anymore because we're glued to screens. Like, man, that was maybe a bit harder sure of a con than we expected with the development of that fun little technology. I think that AI has a huge upside potential, and I'm very fearful and a little bit realistic that it won't see its potential because it will be used nefariously. Obviously, yes, of course, in certain capacities, but I think it will just be used commercially where it could have been used organically to simply make things better. And I'm pretty pessimistic on the amount of money that's behind it and the directions that means that tech flows. I think if there was more money behind it to just, advance tech in a way of like, wow, we could digitally, solve cultural heritage problems. Great. We'd probably be able to use it very positively. But right now, I think the incentive and the money is pushing it in a way that is purely commercial, and generally tech that is purely commercial has not benefited us in the long run most of the time.
Quite fair. What's the greatest photograph ever taken?
There's a handful that are in kind of my Mount Olympus, and
Okay.
I'm trying to categorize, like anything when you say best, right?
Sure.
And I know why you're asking this, because it does a great conversation starter.
It can be as subjective as you like. Doesn't it be an objective?
Understandable. Yeah. I think my favorite is not the best. I think there's the classic like Nat Geo cover that was the Afghan girl. That's one that was everybody can picture. I think the backstory to that is very interesting, and I think actually teaches us a lot about maybe what journalistic standards are today versus then. And in that conversation starter, I really appreciate that photo as something that gets people interested in photography and has a history behind it, but on current reflection, maybe wasn't perfect in quite a number of ways. And that conversation then blends into what I'm very passionate about today, which is the ethics behind travel, the ethics behind cultural sharing, the ethics behind digitization, and capturing things to share with others. So that one definitely ranks pretty highly for me.
Most exotic bite of food in your travels?
Oh man, I've had everything. Not even happily, like just, it's one of those, like, I struggle at this point to even think of, like, I've just given up, at certain points. Somebody will just go like, oh, you got to try this. Isn't this crazy? And I go, yeah, let's get it over with, man. I can't. I mean, I've had everything from like the deep fried insects, to the live insects, to the snake, eel, stuff that you grab out of the ocean. Probably one of the weirder ones is like rattlesnake, fresh rattlesnake, which is kind of parasite laden. I would not encourage people to do that, but that actually goes back to my wildlife research days of you probably shouldn't be allowed to study what you haven't eaten. Is kind of the joke, which is not actually a practice. In case anybody thinks that was what wildlife biologists believe, it's not the case. But I think I've worked with Inuit communities in the Aleutian Islands that still have the NOAA license to kill fur seals and go seal clubbing, as people have colloquially called it, but actually feed their people with it and have like the only standing permit. And I don't know, man. The weirdest bite, the blood sausage in Argentina. You know what? That's my final answer. Hate that. Hated it then, hated it now. You're basically just raw meat stuffed into a tube and you're watching them make it. You're going, why are we doing this? And it's just absolutely laden with like black blood. And then you bite into it and then a bunch of blood goes in your mouth and you go, why is this? And I love Argentina. I apologize to anybody that likes it. Not my thing.
Superb answer. Last two questions, Chris. A cherished trait or skill you got from each of your parents?
Curiosity from my father, and I think toughness from my mother. My father taught me to always question why and to push the envelope of understanding that it's not just good enough to get the answer right. You need to know why you got it. And that level of curiosity and just kind of like hapless misadventure, let's go see what's around that corner. That has obviously worked well for me in the industry I found myself. My mom is somebody who very deeply cares for others and really taught me empathy, but does so in a manner that she will be the one who takes the bullets for everybody else. She'll be the shoulder to cry on. And I think that allowed me to be able to work with lots of different communities because everybody has their own pains and problems. And if you don't care to understand that, you don't have to, like, understand is maybe the wrong word, but if you don't care about it, people aren't going to be able to connect with you. And actually wanting to know why somebody maybe has been burned before or why a place is not friendly to foreigners is going to go miles into you being one of the foreigners that maybe they'll hang out with for the day, because you get it. And that's something that I think she always tried to teach me of, like, but why does somebody else feel that way? I get it, you don't feel that way. Why don't they feel that way? And you go, oh God, other people think, as a kid, somebody's got to teach you.
Wow. Chris, what are you most excited about for the rest of 2026?
I'm really excited about kind of the future of scanning tech. Like I talked about with Gaussian Splats, I think that there is a huge upside to being able to make something look lifelike. And I think it's going to drive a lot of engagement that will tell stories that are really hard to get people engaged with otherwise. And I think the financial barrier for 3D scanning, although maybe negative for my own career, I'm really excited to see people being able to do it themselves without having to engage very expensive equipment or very expensive education. Because ultimately there's a lot of stories that I'm never going to be able to tell. CyArk is never going to be able to tell. And we just can't do it all. So the fact that it seems like this tech is evolving in a way where people are going to be able to do it well solo is, I'm really excited about seeing how that goes. But again, we've talked a lot about what stories we tell and what CyArk does, but I'm one of many people working there, and I get the exciting cocktail stories, and maybe makes for good podcast. But I encourage everybody to check out the overall product that some really kind people have put together.
I could not have less doubt that they will after this conversation. What you and CyArk are doing is nothing short of a magnificent service to us and our planet, Chris. So thank you very much. I know I look forward to donating and really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks so much.
That's really kind of you. Yeah, appreciate it a ton. Appreciate the platform and really excited to see where your platform evolves to next and who the next guests are. So thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure and a half. Thanks, Chris. Oh, how's that for a reality capture passport, recappers? If you feel like doing a good thing and donating just a few bucks to CyArk, just click here or you'll find a link to them in the show notes. As for us and talks like these, they do not happen without those likes and subscribes. So thank you from the bottom of our 3D hearts. Be well.